We'll call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today. It is Monday, August 16th, 2021 at 5:30 in the afternoon. I would ask that you go ahead and put your electronic devices either on silent or on vibrate, and we'll keep the distractions down to a minimum for our meeting today. Roll call, please.
Evans?
Here.
Janser?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Pittner?
Here.
Padragula?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Sitma?
Here. Number 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda this afternoon is the City Manager's report. Mr. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have a whole lot to report outside of the memo, with exception of late last week, I did forward the council a draft of the community survey that staff and I have worked with the consultant to draft. Looking for any final input that you guys have with regards to that before I can give the consultant the go-ahead and put that out. For sake of the public, this is not the typical survey where you put a link on the website and anybody can choose to participate in it, because we're trying to make sure that it's scientifically valid and the results reflect the demographics of our community. And so the consultant will be targeting specific individuals in the community that meet those demographics to respond to this in a way that meets the scientific validation process for the survey. So, but at the end of the day, once those survey results are back, all information, including responses and everything else, will be included on the city website and available to the public for use. But with that being said, those questions are outlined, and again, we're playing a balance here where some of the intent of the survey is to help us be comparable to other communities of like size within the region and within the area. So some of those questions have to have some commonality in how you ask them so that they're measurable and comparable one to another. And then eventually should we continue to proceed doing this survey every 2 to 3 years, it'll give us the ability to compare to ourselves over time. And so you need to maintain some integrity of the questions throughout that period. Not that you can't ask different questions different times, but a vast majority of it needs to stay the same going forward. So, and this is used to measure community satisfaction with the services the city provides, but also to help prioritize needs of the community that we can then implement in decision-making, both you as a governing body and us as staff, as we try to allocate the resources that the public has entrusted with us to make Minot the best and the strongest that we can going forward. So with that, I'd be happy to listen to any feedback that the council may have with regards to that draft survey.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Any questions or comments at this time on that or any other items that were submitted? Alderman Padragula.
Thank you. This looks remarkably thorough. I guess a couple of questions. First of all, what sort of sample size are you anticipating?
We're targeting at least 200 to 400 responses.
Okay.
And
you'll keep...
That gets you about a 95% validity. I mean, you can push for higher, but you may only get 1 or 2% more validity.
So you'll keep pushing for that until you get the 200 to 400, right?
Correct.
And this will be mailed out?
It will be emailed out first or mailed out, and then depending on what responses are, if they need more responses and depending on what demographic they need, they could go over to a phone reach invitation, and then respondents would be able to do that over the phone. But likely you're going to get some communication, either a letter or a postcard or something that's going to give you a link to a website to go do it online and submit it online.
So there will be a follow-up?
Correct.
And I'm going to submit some more detailed comments. I'm sorry I ran out of time to give this the kind of attention it deserves. I'll send you something tonight or tomorrow. But the only negative reaction I have, and this is remarkably thorough, is the length of it. Any kind of thoughts about that?
We tried, I mean, the maximum we really want is 6 pages, but we were trying to do that. But by the time you add some other things in, yeah, we have a lot of services we provide and a lot of input we need from the public. So we tried to minimize that out as much as we could. And again, you're trying to maintain comparability to similar surveys done in other communities. So there's a certain amount of it that you need to keep intact to maintain your comparability.
And this particular company will give us comparable ratings for other cities, correct?
Sure.
Using something fairly similar.
There'll be national comparisons, and then there'll also be comparisons to cities of like size as well as regional within the North Dakota area.
Okay. No, I'm impressed with what I'm seeing here. My only, substantive concern is the length. And if you have a vigorous follow-up program, I think that might help address that. As someone who's designed surveys for the past 40 years or has 40 years of experience in it, that's, it's my professional opinion. It's excellent, but a little concerned about the length.
Every
But it certainly
community is
does tap the dimensions I think are important for us.
Yeah, every community is different. Previous communities, we've kind of gone to that 6-page maximum, and we had sufficient response that we never even had to get to the phone call portion of
Well, it's good to hear.
follow-up. So,
Good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did a survey a few years ago, and I know that there was some concern from some of the citizens that they did not get to participate. If a citizen wants to participate, is there a way that they can do that if they were not chosen in this sample?
On a random sample.
Yeah, well, and it's not, I guess at that point, it's really not that random because they are voicing their request. But I know in the past that was a concern, that they wanted to take a survey and they didn't get the opportunity to do so.
I can talk with the consultant about that. Again, we're trying to maintain the integrity of the demographics, so we don't get, and I'm not saying this is the demographics of Minot, but let's say you get a 70% response from your senior citizens, but they only represent 40% of your population. You don't want that overweighted in the response, and so that's why we pay attention to some of that. But there's again, if there's anyone in the public that is interested in doing that, they can reach out to my office, and I'll try to connect them with the consultant to see if we can work something out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to next item on our agenda. That is number 4, consider the report of the Planning Commission. We did have one item for consideration today, a public hearing to consider a request from Donna Bai representing the Souris River Water Resource District and William and Laverne Erdman for a zoning map amendment on lots 1 through 3 on the Thurston Second Edition and proposed lot 2 Erdman Second Subdivision for the purpose of facilitating future construction of phase MI5 for flood control for that project. The 5 recommendations to the council from the Planning Commission is approve a subdivision to be known as lots 1 and 2 Erdman Second Division, being a replat of lot 4 Thurston Second Edition and outlot 4, all in the southwest quarter of section 18, township 155 north, range 82 west of the 5th principal meridian, Ward County, state of North Dakota. 2 is adopt a resolution to amend the future land use map from industrial to public, semi-public for lots 1 through 3 of Thurston Second Edition and proposed lot 2 Erdman Second Subdivision. 3 is pass an ordinance on first reading to change the zoning map from MI1 light industrial to P public zoning for lots 1 through 3 of the Thurston Second Edition. 4, pass an ordinance on first reading to change the zoning map from M1 light industrial to P public district on proposed lots 2 Erdman Second Subdivision. And 5, ratify the master plan on the proposed improvements. This is a public hearing. Again, anyone, an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or who is neutral to the recommendations that are before us from the Planning Commission. Again, an opportunity for a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak in favor, in opposition, or neutral. Seeing none, Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Motion by Alderman Janser
Second.
to close the public hearing and approve the item. Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion from the council. Any discussion? Last call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. The next section of our agenda is the consent items. We have 15 different items within our consent area for consideration. Just for the public's concern here, any items that would need to have discussion need to be pulled for individual consideration. Otherwise, they will be passed as recommended from staff. Are there any items, 1 through 15, that need to be pulled for individual discussion? There are none from the council before. I'll just ask one more time, any items that need to be pulled for individual discussion? If not, what are the wishes of the council?
Move consent on remaining items.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to move all items.
Second.
By Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. The next section of our agenda this afternoon are the action items. 6.1 is a public hearing. Building relocation request to 4904 Highway 2 East. This is a public hearing to consider the request from Tom Ripplinger to relocate the relocation of a detached garage from 501 6th Street Northeast, Minot 58701, also known as the Hendrickson's First Edition, Lot 8, Les West 64, Block 1 to 4904 Highway 2 East, Minot 58701. Also known as Outlot 67 Southeast, Southwest, less 40 feet, and Lot A, South 21, 15582, subject to the conditions that are attached. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the item. One more time, a call for public hearing for comments. Anyone to speak in favor, in opposition, or neutral. Recommendation to the City Council is to approve the request from staff. Is there a motion maker? Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item. Staff recommendations.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to close the public hearing and approve the recommendations of staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next item, 6.2, is another public hearing. This is a public hearing to consider a request from Randy Wergler to relocate a single-family residence from 1412 First Avenue Southeast, Minot, North Dakota 58701, also known as the Lennox Park Addition, Lot 46 to 4701 10th Avenue Northwest, Minot, North Dakota 58703, also known as the Shodall Addition, Lot 2. Also relocate detached garage from 1520 Burdick Expressway East, Minot 58701, also known as Elmwood Addition, east 30 feet of Lot 5 and all of Lot 7, less portion for Highway to 4701 10th Avenue Northwest, Minot 58703, also known as the Shodall Addition, Lot 2. Subject to the conditions, the recommendation is to the City Council to approve the relocation request. Again, this is a public hearing, an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendation. One more call for discussion or public input on the item that is before us. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item with staff recommendations.
Motion to approve, close the public hearing and approve the item by Alderman Pittner, second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item on our action items is the 2021 nuisance abatement, item 6.3. The nuisance abatement project 4439 was approved by City Council July 1st, 2019. One abatement remains open, which has been completed and is ready to be special assessed. In addition, the City Forest Forester acted upon 3 tree removals. All associated costs have been identified and included in the attached list. The city wishes to certify the list to Ward County for collection within the property taxes. The request approval of the 2021 nuisance abatement list is to be special assessed and certified to Ward County. That is the recommendation to the full council.
Move approval of the abatement list.
Motion to approve the abatement list and the recommendation is there by Alderwoman Evans. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. 6.4 is the special assessment approval, 2021 weed cutting. The Public Works Department has responded to a number of complaints regarding tall grass and weeds. The attached list represents those locations the city abated for the 12-month period beginning August 1st, 2020, but has not received payment. The city wishes to certify the attached list to the Ward County for collection within the property taxes. The recommendation to the City Council is request the approval of the 2021 weed cutting list to be special assessed and certified to Ward County.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 6.5 is the City Hall Design Development submitted. This is item 4466. Since June, JLG has been meeting with various departments, stakeholders, and the building committee during the design development phase of the project. JLG will be presenting the design development documents to the council for the review and sign-off. Once approved, JLG will enter into the construction drawing phase of the project where plans and specifications will be developed for the building. Recommendations to the City Council was to approve the design development submittal and move forward with the construction drawing phase, and 2, recommend the council do not move forward with the solar panels at this time. We do have our city engineer, Mr. Meyer, here with some details. Good evening, Lance.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Tonight, like in past, I have Eric Hoffert with us from JLG, and he's going to run you through this quick presentation. And if you have any questions for him or staff, we're happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening and welcome back.
Thank you. Got a quick presentation for you tonight. I want to give you an update on the City Hall project. I'm not sure if this is what's in your packet or if this is the presentation that I had sent.
That's your presentation.
Okay. Okay, so update. What we've been doing since the last time we've been in front of you to give you an update. Well, we've been working with all of the departments, the department heads and the staff, having key meetings to refine the design. Met with the building committee several times as well. We had our community open house, which we had to get input from the community. It was open to everyone. We've been exploring various options, exploring ideas that have been presented by you all as well as the community and the building committee. Defining materials, refining all of the systems within the design, and all along the way updating the budget. So I'm just going to scroll through some images here. You've seen these renderings in the past. This one has been updated. This is the lobby as you would walk into the main entrance on the second floor of this is the old Wells Fargo building. And we've explored the city council chambers as well, which you are seeing here. This was well received by the staff and the building committee. Incorporating some wood elements into the ceiling, playing off the existing window pattern here. You can see the dais in the background as well. Uh-oh. Not sure what happened there. I was going to show you the floor plans here, but it looks like they got cut off. The floor plans have been developed and we're pretty well to a point now where walls have stopped moving. We've gotten buy-in from all the staff and the department heads. Oh, it looks like Derek's fixing it here. Well, here's my presentation. We're going to go full screen here. We good? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Don't write this down.
No pressure.
I know.
We have an office episode.
Right?
Third tries the charm.
Making the sausage. All right, go ahead.
Okay.
I think you're on slide 4. As I
Okay,
pulled it
thanks,
up.
Derek. Okay, so this was my actual presentation. I wanted to start here. We've presented these each time, and I just wanted to mention our goals and aspirations haven't changed. We revisit these at the beginning of every meeting, and all the decisions that we've been making along the way are to support and in reaction to these goals. And I'll just read through them quickly. We want the facility to be welcoming, to encourage civic engagement. We want to be great stewards of taxpayer resources. We want to be on budget. We want the facility to be a tool to attract and recruit and retain top talent. We want to encourage collaboration and teamwork amongst departments and within the community. We want our spaces in our building to be flexible, to adapt to technological and staffing needs over time. And we want it to be user-friendly, a one-stop shop for citizens. So again, these are just kind of the baseline to which we're comparing and the lens in which we're making all of our decisions. Here's the schedule. We're on schedule. This is the same one that we reviewed last time. So here we are, August 16th. At the end of the design development phase, we'll be asking for approval to move into the construction documents phase today. Looking further ahead, we'll be looking to complete the construction documents and go out for bid in mid-October and look to open bids, mid to end of November and get right into construction. Okay. So floor plans and site plan. This should look fairly similar. Not doing a lot on the site proper. We are looking at doing a little bit of landscaping at the front of the building and looking at restriping the parking lot as well. Again, floor plans, not a lot of change here. It's just more refinement. Again, getting buy-in from all the departments. We feel really good with where we're at in terms of the design. And we're kind of now in the mode of getting these things ready for bid, these drawings. So I'll just scroll through these. If there's any questions on the floor plan layout, please feel free. Here's the second floor. You can see finance department, council chambers on the right there. And the third floor, the uppermost floor, kind of the blank spot on the bottom right is existing that is not going to be remodeled, and we see that as the opportunity for future expansion. It's kind of your built-in growth factor. Exterior image. This one should look pretty familiar. We presented this at the last meeting, still tracking with this design. Again, interior rendering. Not a lot of changes here. It's just, again, starting to refine the materials that we're planning on specifying here. Still have that central open stair and elevator core. And you're seeing the service windows on the left and the right as you walk into the main entrance. And the council chambers. Okay, so I mentioned all along the way we've been tracking the budget, and we've done a thorough, detailed material takeoff now. This is not just based anymore on square footage of the building. We're starting to consider the actual systems that we're including. Costs are trending up. We're still tracking under budget overall. We're still tracking a contingency, which is a risk management tool, $650,000 to be exact in contingency. About half of that we would bring into the construction phase. so that, to account for unknown things and things that come up during construction like they tend to do in old existing buildings. And the other half of that is what we call design contingency, which is just to account for the things we haven't talked about or haven't designed yet to get us from this point to when we let this out for bid. So right now we're tracking at about $13.5 million for the base bid estimate. That's compared to a $13.8 million budget. That's the total project cost. So what we're doing as the design team is we want to look for value. If there's places to save dollars, we want to be great stewards of taxpayer dollars. So we're currently in that process of finding places to save dollars, and we just call that value analysis. It's just a great thing to do on every project to make sure we're not missing any opportunities. So I did want to make it very clear that there's base bid and there are alternates, and we use alternates as both a risk management tool to make sure that, again, we're tracking under budget, but we want to make sure that on bid day, if you get favorable bids and we come in lower than expected, you have the opportunity to add some of these scope items. And on the other hand, if bids come in higher than expected, we want to make sure we're not designing right to that budget so that you're not over budget on bid day. And I just wanted to make it clear that the items that you're seeing here in this image are being tracked as alternates, right? So they're not in that base bid number. So the window replacement, the increased glazing that you see there above the entrance improvements itself, which is basically just cladding that existing canopy that exists on that building with some new materials, and then insulating the exterior walls. So those are items that we want to try to find value within the project and lower that base bid estimate so that we can help buy and pay for those types of things on bid day. So with that, I would open it up to questions.
Alderwoman Evans, thank you first and foremost for the presentation and all of the detailed work that went into that. And for anyone who wants to see this in great detail can log on to the website. It's all attached. Alderwoman Evans.
Can we go back to the previous screen, the entrance? Do you anticipate the front there parking for disabled, van accessible vehicles? Will that be there?
Yes, let me go back to the site plan,
Okay,
actually.
great.
That's kind of hard to see here. But all of those kind of in the middle, you see the kind of cross-hatched parking spaces. Those would be accessible parking. And we would make sure we have an accessible path from that central sidewalk to the main entrance. And we're designing the building itself to be universally accessible, trying to avoid, sometimes you'll see, for instance, at a service desk where you'll have a regular height countertop and then a lower for wheelchair. We're trying to make it all universally accessible so that there's not kind of a separate area where a wheelchair-bound person, for instance, would have to use.
So the two front ones look like they're van accessible, and then the four back ones are just regular size?
I believe that's how we're tracking it, yep.
Okay. I've had some constituents who are in van accessible, vans, I guess, in wheelchairs, and I would like us to consider having more than two of the van accessible. I mean, that they really need that space to get out, and two seems like a lot, but we have a meeting, let's say here at City Council, that has an issue that's of interest to the disabled community. Those two van accessible spots are going to be gone in a second. So, I know it would mean less regular parking spots, but at least making two of those additional for the 8 feet or whatever the van accessible requirement is, I think would be really helpful. Or all of them if it's possible, and still have enough parking. I mean, with that parking garage next door, that helps a lot. But, it's been an increasing problem with the space people need to get that, ramp out to bring their wheelchair out of the van. And then back to the council chambers picture, again on the disabled thing. How are folks to get behind the dais? Or I can't see behind that marble-ish. Is there a ramp? Is there stairs?
Let me go back to the floor plan. I can't point, but on the bottom or the south side of the council chambers there, you can see kind of a square, or a rectangle on the south side of the dais. That's a ramp to get up, and there'd be stairs on the other side. Yep.
Okay, Great. Thank you so much for illuminating that.
Yes.
Other questions at this time? Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, I had one question about the council chambers, and then I wanted you to go over the alternatives and flesh that out a little bit more. The question about the council chambers is how high will the dais be up?
I believe right now it's a 1-foot platform, so it's 2 steps up, and then the dais itself is another, I think it's 36 inches above that. So about 4 feet above the lowest floor.
And what is this here now?
I think this might be 42 inches, or I'm sorry. I think it's probably about the same. I'd have to measure it. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
So it'll be less than this. It won't be as imposing and as perhaps intimidating to people?
That's the goal, yes.
Well, so it'll be significantly less high.
Right. I mean, this looks like it's probably in that 21 to 24 inch range plus, plus probably 3.5 feet. So it'll be a little bit lower. The building committee thought that it was still important to have some
Right.
elevation just for view, to make sure everyone in the audience can still see.
Okay.
But
I'm looking at it accessibility-wise too, not just in terms of people with handicaps or disabilities. I'm looking at it in terms of psychological accessibility to the governing body. And people are often intimidated by having to look up. We're not judges. We're not some tribunal here, typically. In terms of the potential scope adjustments, what is the exterior curtain wall storefront replacement? Is that along the avenue there or where?
yes, so that's all of the existing windows, which are a combination of curtain wall or storefront system, depending on which ones we're looking at.
Oh, so this would be all the wall, all the windows?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Exterior wall insulation, rather. How significant is that?
So the building right now is not very well insulated. It's just some bat insulation that has very likely kind of started to slink down over time, and there's probably gaps. It's not very well sealed in terms of from an air infiltration standpoint. So we think it would really benefit the project, and the plan would be to take off the existing gypsum wallboard around the perimeter and come back in with like a closed cell spray foam insulation, which is going to give you much greater insulation value as well as just seal the whole building up so you don't get the air infiltration. Also makes a big difference on, energy use as well.
Would that look like the parking ramp exterior that we had to spray on? That APHIS, I think it's called?
No, this would actually be on the back side of those kind of vertical precast concrete panels that you're seeing, and then we would put new sheetrock over that so you wouldn't see it anywhere.
Okay. Okay. So it would look like masonry or not?
It's like a foam insulation. Sometimes you'll see it like in window jams. It's not pretty to look at. That's why we don't want to leave it exposed.
Okay.
If I might here, it's for a lot of folks that go in and do the spray foam insulation, this stuff does not settle. It seals the entire structure, and then you put your EFIS or your sheetrock or your finishing, whether it's what is behind you or whatever for the walls, so that it's essentially just like insulation. You don't leave insulation exposed. Right. It's what's on the inside of the wall. Our presenter was being very kind about the current situation of the insulation there now. It is and has been very poor to just lousy, even from when Wells Fargo was in there. Folks that used to sit on the west side of that building could not keep drinks or their lunches underneath their desk during the winter because they would freeze.
Wow.
So that's firsthand experience.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good explanation. In terms of exterior precast acid cleaning, could you tell us what that's about?
Yeah, so it's what it sounds like. It's the exterior precast panels, just cleaning them. So there's companies out there that'll come and do like an acid wash and just freshen up those panels.
Because there's like flowing rust or some red things look like they've dripped. Would that take care of that on the side of the building?
It should take care of most of that, yes.
Okay, okay. Roof, sit-stand desks plus conference table upgrades. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in the base bid, we do have a $650,000 line item for furniture. And JLG is under contract to help the city design and procure all of that furniture. So this is just a line item to add the sit-stand desk. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but usually it'll be like a button on your desk, and you can either get it up at standing level or sit down on your chair. Just offers kind of more ergonomic flexibility for the users. But it does come at a premium, which is why we're trying to identify a line item cost for it.
And staff has expressed interest in that?
Yes.
Good, good. Roofing.
Roofing is to replace the existing roof. It's not at the end of its useful life currently. I believe it's about 15 years old. Typically, you're going to get 20 plus, 25 years, give or take, out of a roof. But we did want to get a price. If we're going to have contractors on site and the budget allows, could be a good time to replace the roof. But I'm not hearing that it's a high priority. I don't know of any major, of any leaking that is occurring currently. Certainly, if we replaced it, we could add insulation and again help kind of that thermal envelope, which is going to help lower your utility costs as well.
Okay. And then the last item you addressed a little bit in the narrative, that was with the PV system, which I take it as photovoltaic or panels. You're giving us a break-even point of, what, 15 years, 20 years, 19 years, I think, 19 and a half years. But you also didn't look at the possibility of grants or something else to offset the cost. And did you also project in or not project in likely utility cost increases?
So the numbers, you're right, do not include any tax rebates or grants or anything like that. We did not go down exploring that in great detail. And it's just assuming current utility costs. So certainly if the cost of electricity goes up over time, you would save, there would be additional kind of compound savings there. So it's kind of a worst case scenario, if you will. It should theoretically be less than that.
So I think in the narrative you told us that the recommendation at this point would be not to include the solar panels, but that could be an option that could be added later on. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Sure. Yes, the building committee has decided that it wasn't worthwhile at this point to continue to pursue that for a number of reasons. One of them is, there's some design costs associated with designing that. We would still track it as an alternate so that you could kind of take it or leave it on bid day. So there's a scenario that it gets designed and the city pays for the design, but doesn't actually get the end product because the budget doesn't allow for it. So that was one of the concerns. And then to your point about allowing for it in the future, it's pretty simple to add these. They're just rooftop mounted.
It is.
They're rooftop mounted panels that sit on a rack that they literally sit on top of the roof and they're held down with some ballast. And then it's getting some conduit up there and finding some space inside for the electrical components, some panels and inverters and things like that. So it's certainly something that could be accounted for in the future, and we can start to earmark some space, perhaps on the third floor in that expanded area that I showed you, to allow for that as a future project.
Because the narrative, I think, was persuasive in terms of not having a green roof. If you're not sure that, excuse me, the building structure would support that load, and that seems a little bit, I hate to say it's too green, but the photovoltaics don't seem to be too green, particularly when you're looking at the climate melting. Well, hopefully we will get some good bids on that, because that's something personally I would like to see us go toward, both as a way of saving money. I mean, if we're looking at a maximum return on our investment of less than 20 years, that seems like a worthwhile bet. And, my guess is that utility prices will significantly increase. And there's also the issue of, I think, being a good example to the community and being progressive and looking forward. So I'm going to keep my eyes on that. But the green roof, I understand. That's fine. Thank you.
On the side of I was part of that committee as well, and just to add on here, the idealistic versus realistic is where I'm at with solar panels. We've got way more cost than we have availability for funds on important things like insulation and facade and just making it look like it needs to be. Something that certainly very much when we rebuilt our house, we stubbed PVC up into my attic to be able to run things down the road. Same can be that aspect can be introduced here, to where some of the infrastructure is set, and if grants down the road can pay for it, awesome, great. but we got to take care of the basic needs before we get into what I would even call extravagant in terms of trying to save money 20 years down the road or get to that break-even point. But Lance, you look like you had something more to add.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Alderman Padragula, just, I heard you say something, I wanted to be clear. At this time, the recommendation is to not design and bid the PV system. We would make a provision, stubbing conduit and those sort of things, where the city could then in the future design that system and have it installed if we were to find grant funding or something that would allow that. But I wanted everyone to be on the same page that right now the recommendation, which council can change, is that we would not include that in the bid. So if we wanted to do that tonight, then what we'd have to do is authorize us to negotiate a contract amendment with JLG for that design, and then we would proceed with designing that system and including it as an alternate. But there's probably about a $20,000 cost there that may or may not be used. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear on how that would work.
Thank you, Lance. Any other questions at this time from the presentation or other items that were included? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not necessarily a question, but just a point. I think Alderman Padragula asked a lot of questions that the building committee has been tasked with trying to answer as well. And knowing that we want to stay on budget and that list of alternatives is fairly long. I mean, that was why the recommendation came out to not pursue the solar panels at this time. You'll have to help me with this one, Eric. I don't know if it'll be the building committee or if it'll be the council who will have to rank those alternates, because when we go into bid, we need to know what's first, what's second, what's third, and so on, because that is one of the HUD regulations, I believe. So we're going to have those discussions on how we want to see them come before the bid opportunities. So.
Further questions or comments? Alderman Pittner.
Maybe just a point of clarification from Alderwoman Olson. Will the alternates be ranked if there is room for that? Will that be ranked by the council, full council, or will that be the committee that looks at those alternates?
Alderman Pittner, I can maybe speak to that. I think the way we would probably approach it is to, the same way we do some of these other big decisions, is to review it with the building committee and make a recommendation to the council for approval, unless we think as a building committee that can be made without council review. But that would probably be the way I would start.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, we would, as a building committee, help provide that recommendation. We would bring that recommendation to all of you when it's time to approve plans and call for bids. And if you thought that a different arrangement had to be made within those alternates, then we would adjust that before we sent it out. So council gets final say, building committee would give you a recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification. Alderman Ross.
Just a couple of, you're the consultant, the team that we brought on for this. What's your confidence level that the bids are going to come in at 13.8 or below?
Alderman Ross, the market right now is very volatile. So, we're confident in our numbers. We think we're being conservative in our numbers. We're also incorporating a good deal of risk management in the form of contingencies and alternates. You see that number at the bottom of the budget, currently at $300,000 under budget. We want to get that more like $700,000 or $800,000 under budget. Again, to account for possible volatility in the market on bid day, but then also to hopefully buy some of those alternates like your new windows and your exterior insulation. So I guess to answer your question, we're confident in our numbers, but just know that there's a lot of volatility and there's a lot of time between now and when the bids actually come in, and things are changing by the day.
Worst case scenario, all the bids come in over budget. How far does that push this project back?
Well, we would have to, as a design team and as a building committee, talk about areas for savings, probably cut scope, and we would have to redesign and put the documents back out for bid. So depending on the amount of overage, it could be a couple weeks or a couple of months. It's really hard to say. if it's significantly over budget, it could be kind of a total redesign. If it's $20,000 or $30,000 over budget, we can probably figure that out in pretty short order.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. To the council, we have two recommendations before us. Alderman Ross.
I move approval.
Motion to approve both recommendations.
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Patagula.
I'd like to ask that those two be split, the two parts.
Look to the motion maker. Are we okay with splitting those individually?
Yeah. Yes.
To the second?
Thank you.
Okay. We'll take these individually then. Further discussion on the first question. Final call for discussion on the first question. Recommended the council approve the design development submittal and move forward with the construction phase or drawing phase. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll on the first.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. The second recommendation is the council not move forward with the solar panels at this time. Discussion on that individual item. Final call. Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, I guess this is one of those values thing. I think that the proposed alternatives look very good, and I would leave it up to the committee with our ultimate approval to rank them at the end, and we'll see what we get on those. I think they're all very reasonable, and I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that those would be the priorities. However, again, given the way the climate and environment are going, and we're looking at a project that would take no longer than 20 years to break even, and hopefully this building will be around for 75 years or longer. I guess I just want to have that option of photovoltaics built in from the start. I think we have to start getting serious about this kind of stuff, and even if I'm the only vote for it, I just feel obligated to push us to being more environmentally conscious. I'm not, again, going for the green roof because that is not feasible, but I think this is a halfway measure, and I feel I need to do that.
Final call for discussion. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just in response to Alderman Padragula's comment, I believe the building committee did look at this very seriously as something that, if we had the funds to allow for it, it would certainly be something that was being considered. But trying to be financially responsible in this situation and knowing that long list of alternatives, that's why it's not on there. So I don't think that it's the building committee is opposed to it. It's just right now the other alternatives are kind of rising to the top.
Alderman Patagula.
I understand that and I accept that, but I also would point out that the architects and the planners did not fully delve into the option of other cost offsets like grants and things like that. So that really, again, is a least upper bound, I think, of what we would be paying. And if, again, we can break even in less than 20 years, actually it might be significantly less than that, I'd like to see it considered. I'm not saying that, I'm not questioning at all the decision or the motives. I just think that that's something that we should be thinking of. That's all.
Alderman Jansen.
Can anybody from the architectural team tell me how long solar panels last? And I guess my question is, okay, if we bought these things and we get out there 20 years and start to get a payback, and in year 25 they're shot, that's not a very good payback in my view. So
It's true.
any ideas?
Yes, Alderman Janser. Typically, average panel lifespan is in that 25 to 30-year range. And it's not like they just stop working at a certain point. They just start to degrade to a point to where the output, you're not getting the return on investment that you were on day one. So 25 to 30 years is what we're seeing currently.
Thank you.
But to clarify.
Alderwoman Evans.
To clarify that, you, at the 25-year mark, you only had to replace the panels. The cost of in putting in the system is already there, and the capturing and all of that. So it's not the full cost. Every 25 years you have to reinvest. It is just the replacement of the panels, which are costly, but it's not the entire system that needs replacing.
Thank you, sir. Final call for discussion. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify that what we're discussing tonight would be spending the additional $20,000 at this time for JLG to investigate this further. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now.
Thank you for that clarification, Alderwoman Olson. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is to approve, and that is approve the recommendation not to move forward with the solar panels at this time. Please call the roll.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
No.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
No.
Motion is approved. 6.6 on our agenda is the Retail Coach LLC contract. Staff recently concluded an RFQ process for a consultant to assist the City of Minot with retail service recruitment. The city received one bid response from Retail Coach LLC, and their proposal was received and determined to meet all the specifications of the RFQ. The recommendation to the City Council is to approve a one-year contract with 2 potential annual renewals with Retail Coach LLC in the amount of $47,500. I'd look to perhaps our city manager for a bit of detail on this one prior to the motion.
I shall ask Mr. Rosenthal to come forward and I'll help fill in any gaps.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mr. Rosenthal.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The work to be done by the Retail Coach is an important analytical tool. It's an important recruitment tool. What the consultant would do is 3 major areas. They would do determine the retail market area being served by the city, look at retail leakage, and look at retail opportunities. Retail leakage is essentially indicates how well the retail needs of local residents are being met, and the leakage essentially says that we're leaking out sales that could be perhaps recaptured here. So it gives us a metric to take a look at the kinds of things that could be sold here that are being supplied elsewhere. To look at what Aaron Farmer of the Retail Coach had responded, it was already stated that they met the RFP requirements. The firm is competent to carry out the work that they propose to accomplish. They have 20 years' experience. They've worked in more than 650 communities. And in one particular area, they've been well represented in successfully recruiting in the food industry. I think that they responded on a number of areas that I think are important. They will, although they're serving the entire city, and let me repeat that, they're repeating the serving the entire city with this, they would look at a couple specialized areas. They would look at downtown as a separate retail location. They would also examine the impact of the Air Force Base on retail sales. They would be educating local retailers on the importance of this material and how they can benefit by using the data. They will identify entrepreneurs and franchisees who could start up businesses and fill some of these gaps. So it's not just bringing people in, it's growing some of the people locally. They would help break down the retail gaps into 70 categories and subcategories. So you have some idea, you know, women's clothing, women's shoes, men's clothing, men's shoes, children's, family items, household goods, I mean, a whole variety of categories. And they'd be identifying the market vacancies that to be filled. They would provide retail site profiles toward helping to get those sites filled. They would also be providing retailer feasibility packages and a newsletter, which could then be a template for doing further work. And they would also then be online important, would be developing an online dashboard to support the program. I would also say that, in terms of breaking this down, they will be looking at the demographic and psychographic profiling of the customers who are in the area, with an eye on taking a look at frequent customers and, of course, getting those people in here on a regular basis, spending more money. In short, I think they fill the bill, and I think they would do a good job. They have a lot of experience.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Any questions for Jonathan, Alderwoman Evans?
Jonathan, this was the part of the budget amendment, right? We did on June 7th, the
That's right.
allocation. So the money's already been allocated to economic development activities, and it was up to $50,000 for this consultant, correct?
That's right. There's money set aside for that at that time.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Rosenthal? Alderman Patagula.
When you use words like psychograph, my ears perk up. Refresh my memory as to how this would sample or survey or help us in terms of online competition. I mean, I know we're starting to do lots of good things to build, local Main Street businesses, and that's very good. And by Main Street, I mean not just this physical street, but Main Street as a larger collective. My sense is that, it's Main Street versus Amazon. It's everybody. It's even big box stores versus Amazon. With the exception of, if we can help people sell to Amazon and through Amazon, then we really help other people out. But how would this help with that end of it? How would that, to what extent would it measure what people are doing online and things like that?
Well, the biggest thing, it doesn't directly measure online sales. You know where they're going, but you know where you're not selling, and so you're in a position to recapture or go after those areas that we know are leaking out. If essentially, to a certain amount of hyperbole here, but if you said we're not selling any shoes here, and they're all being, purchased someplace else, you have some idea of that you need to concentrate your efforts on selling shoes. As this gets refined in future years, this is probably not the upfront question, but you would want to ask yourself the question, well, why is that selling elsewhere? What could we be doing to improve that here? If staying on the shoe fantasy, I think that you would say, well, we can properly size them. We can properly display them so that people have choice that might come off better than just looking at a photograph of it. And then again, we may also, although have a local business, also have an online presence that makes certain that people take a look at what is available locally, though online. So there are some questions that can be answered by virtue of doing this. That's part of the process of educating the retailers too, to give them an opportunity. Now, we can't make them do it, of course, but the idea is we're helping to you got to have the tool first, and then the consultant will help them figure out how to use it.
So that might help them actually with day-to-day marketing and day-to-day sales strategies and business development strategies.
Yes.
That sounds promising. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, it's, some stuff is still going to be sold elsewhere,
Yeah.
but you want more of it here.
Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Rosenthal? Alderman Ross.
I've got a couple. First of all, Jonathan, can you talk about, we've got a company that's coming in, Retail Coach. They've got a 20-plus year history of doing projects like this. Talk about some other communities and the impact they've had on other communities, the success other communities have found.
I didn't come with a lot of examples here, and maybe Harold's better prepared on this one item, but we certainly have a number of communities that felt that they had their hand held through the process of I mean, it's not just Harold and I looking at this, it's the hand-holding that goes to the community at large, people who are not familiar with the marketing aspects, the people who are directly affected, and they found that they were there to help in those communities. I'm afraid I'm not going to mention, be able to tell you which communities were immediately affected. One of them, actually, the city manager had worked at it in a previous life.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. This was the company we contracted with in Warrensburg, and actually Warrensburg had selected them prior to my arriving as the city manager. But I spent my 5 years in Warrensburg working directly with them. Had a great deal of success with them. They helped us recruit in a Marshalls, Firehouse Subs, Schlotsky's. We had a significant need for additional grocery sales within our community. Minot has a benefit of having a pretty strong grocery market, so I'm not saying that's a need here, but in Warrensburg we did. And it took 5 years of work, and probably about 3 months after I left and came here to Minot, Hy-Vee announced that they were taking over a store there and expanding and those types of things. The main thing there is they do a lot of that data analysis. They help the retail companies do a lot of that homework for them in a way that they can trust and understand, and is presented to them in a way they understand. And then, so they kind of help give that sales pitch of the demographics of your community and why it fits their business plan, and continue to follow up with them over the years. This is another thing. There's other communities out there that can do the data analysis, but this community does a really good job of using their connections with developers and investors and retail companies and understanding their business plans and helping play matchmaker more or less in doing that. And that's where we had success in Warrensburg. There's a lot of companies out there that will do the data analysis and turn it over to you, and then it's on you and your staff to figure out how to make those connections and make those sales pitches. Retail Coach is there from beginning to, for pretty much from phone call to, I'm interested, tell me about this community, tell me about some of the sites that are available, all the way to pretty much ribbon cutting day, and helping you get from start to finish through all of that. And again, great success in, they did some helping presentations with our downtown business owners as far as what the retail data showed and how they could potentially use some of that data as they made their business decisions locally with their businesses, and doing some of those types of things. And so we had a significant amount of success with this company, and it paid dividends for us in Warrensburg. And I've heard similar type of feedback from other clients of theirs as I interacted with them at the ICSC conferences and some of those types of things. So it's a Texas based company, but has had significant growth and expansion over the years, and do a good job and provide some services and some bang for the buck that you may not get with some of their competitors.
Continue.
One more follow-up, Jonathan. I'm making the assumption that on August 17th of 2022, we're going to be back discussing this again to renew this contract.
Well, if there's a desire for a follow-on, I suppose it has to go through the council, yes.
So my question is then, what are we going to base, what should we be looking for as a council to say, yes, we want to continue with this after a year? What are there going to be measurables? What can we look forward to a year from now to say, this was a good move, let's continue it?
Well, you're certainly going to be in a position where we've defined the market. We know where we're marketing to, how far our outreach is. We certainly want to be taking a look at the data that tells us how many people are we getting from Canada, and what's our market area, how far out are we selling, and then we'll be in a better position to say what are we missing. So we can say, there's certainly areas where we're saying we're missing a number of sales in a number of areas. Again, with the 70, when you have 70 categories to break down into, we'll be in a position to say which are stronger, which are weaker, which are more likely to yield results, which are less likely to yield results. And it's both a recruitment, we've kind of suggested maybe there's a recruitment thing, and it is, but it's also a retention aspect, because we'll be talking to the local companies and saying, here are some areas that can be done to strengthen your business. That's part of that educational element. And we'll be able to take a look at what retail sales look like, how they're rebounding. We'll have some idea of how our sales tax figures look like and if those are growing. And take a look at, again, those strengths in those areas. I think we may have time in between if this works out well to do a recruitment round. We have some money set aside for that possibility. There's the International Shopping Center show where we might be prepared to do some recruitment there and see what those results are. Normally, those take a little while, so we should be in a position to see where we're showing results, who's showing interest, whether they've. It's good just when people are kicking the tires versus necessarily making a location decision. Sometimes that can take a little while, but we should be in a strong position to say where our opportunities are and make that adjustment going forward. Although I'm suggesting to you that I think we'll have a good start on a fair number of these things before next summer. And so I think there'll be a fair amount to review, but at this point, without some basic research, I can't give you any metrics to what percentages or whatever to go on.
Mr. City Manager.
So in response to that, the first part that they're going to focus on primarily is creating a lot of our demographic profiles and those types of things. So that's going to be a lot of your deliverables, doing that data analysis, preparing that, creating the dashboard, creating the site profile pages, those types of things that they're then going to use to market and answer questions for people as they come in, make sure they know the data. Once that's in place, one, they'll help continue to keep that up to date every time that new data is released and comes out. But two is your measurables then become, how many companies have you reached out to, have you followed up with? How many have you sent letters out? How many responses are you getting? How many current potential businesses are you working with? And they should be able to answer those types of questions and give you those types of measures, such as, we went to the ICSC conference. We had 13 appointments with potential clients with you. Of those 13, we have 6 clients that we're still working with that are exploring interest in your community. And hopefully someday they're coming back and saying, hey, we helped bring this business, and we helped bring this business, and we helped bring this business in. So they should be able to give you those demographics and those types of measurements as you go on. At least has been my experience in working with them for the last 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Yep.
Any further questions at this time for Mr. Rosenthal? Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion from the council.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Patagula.
I just wanted to express my gratitude to Alderman Ross and the city manager and Mr. Rosenthal for the kind of discussion we've just had, and the mayor too. I don't remember this happening very often, where we're asking right at the beginning, before we adopt something, how will we know if it's working a year from now? That's a very good kind of question to ask, and I don't see us asking that as often as I think we should be. So I think that raises our discussion to a whole higher level in terms of kind of looking into the future in terms of what benchmarks we'll be using. So I'm really impressed with that process. I needed to say that.
Further discussion or comments? Last call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yep.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That winds down our action item section of our budget of our agenda this evening. That takes us to number 7, and that's personal appearances. An opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. Again, this is an opportunity for public appearances. Anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. All right, seeing no one, we will move on to the miscellaneous and discussion items. 8.1 is our city council budget question and answer section. Perhaps we'll take a little less formality on this portion and take a look around the dais here. We do have our finance director, we do have some city staff and our city manager here, of course. If anyone does want to lead things off with any questions, this would be an opportunity to ask our finance director, city manager, or department heads too on any items or even just general discussion. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start out. I do have a few questions, and in all transparency, I did meet with the city manager and the city finance director, so I've got a few answers to some of these questions. I may ask them again just for the benefit of everyone here, but this was a question that I didn't have an answer to, so I'm going to call Mr. Jonason up. They're all sitting back there wondering who was first. Thank you. So I noticed that there were some really large increases for the internment fees at Rose Hill Cemetery. Can you give us some information about that?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Alderman Olson, we did a survey of all the cemeteries in the state and compared our rates to their rates. We haven't raised our fees for quite some time, so we're just trying to be comparable. Our fees, I think if you look at them, you'll see that they're still less than most of the other cemeteries, but we're getting up to being, like I said, more comparable with other cemeteries in the state.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer, and I know we've had that discussion up here in the past that we need to charge what it costs us to, to provide a service. So thank you for that. I do have one other question, and maybe it'll be you, and maybe it'll be Brian that will come up. But in the proposed budget, we're looking at 18 possible new positions, and I believe 2 were for transit drivers. And I think that one route was for the new hospital. Are we a little zealous, perhaps, in thinking that the hospital construction will be done in 2022 to offer that route, or will there be other stops along that route? And then what would the other route be if it's not a hospital route?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Alderman Olson, yes, it would be the hospital. Keep in mind, we need to get the routes up so that we're running them, timing them, making sure that they'll work before everything's in place, namely the hospital. The last we heard is that they're going to be online in the end of 2022.
Okay.
That's why we had the one position in there was for that route, but it will also serve all of that area, I guess, west of 16th Street and north of 37th Avenue that's growing. There's apartment complexes out there going in, businesses going in, so it'll provide us a more complete service out there now in the future when it comes, as it continues to develop. The other route would be in northwest Minot to serve some of the development on the west side of the bypass in that 21st Avenue area, and then the Ramstead School area to expand into there. We don't currently go that far north and west, so we would like to expand into there. We think there's quite a bit of ridership that we're missing out on up there.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question on that, and then you're off the hot seat for me. I mean, is there some federal funding that would help assist paying in some of those 2 transit positions? Is there?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Olson, yes, those positions, they're 50% funded through federal transit. So, basically, we buy one position, we get one free. It's kind of how we look at it. But so, yes, it is 50% funded.
All right, thank you.
Any questions for our Public Works Director while he's on the hot seat at the dais there? Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on our budget section? Alderwoman Olson, continue.
Sure. The police chief. Thank you, Chief. You have some positions that are among the 18 that are proposed to us. And, I'd like to give you just a little bit of time to kind of describe some of those positions, but then two that I was looking at in particular are the two dispatch positions. And I'm wondering if those are part of the City Hall expansion or if that is something that is needed at this time.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Olson, those are actually positions that we need now. Originally, we had 3 in the budget. We determined that if we ever hit the point where we were fully staffed in there, that would put us in a position where for a short period of time, we'd have too many people working in the current dispatch. So that was an easy one to cut. But as it stands right now, there are times we only have 2 dispatchers working, and that is not adequate anymore. I mean, it just, they can't keep up and they don't get lunch breaks if there's only 2 people. So we've been actually using part-time and overtime to supplement so that people can take lunch breaks and actually step away to get something to eat.
And if you want to, go on with the other positions.
With the
that you-
So we had, one of the priorities that we see, and the past week is a good example, was adding a public information officer for our department. We've tried to use various positions within our current staffing to fill that role, but it comes down to when we had the incident on Monday with 911 going down, we struggled to manage that and have somebody available to push that information. So that position is also would assist not just our department, but in talking with the fire department could also help with some of their releases, some of the things that they have happening. So more of a public safety. We really have enough for that person to do, but that would be one way of also supplementing their needs as well. The computer forensics tech is another important position, as most of you heard or in my conversations with everybody. There's definitely an increase in our caseload, and especially when we get into electronic evidence, there's just an overwhelming need. And right now we have one of our detectives that gets trained. As we've talked about before, we've had 2 people trained in there. We've lost both of them to other agencies. So we're hoping that if we can hire a civilian for that position, that it'll be something that somebody that really wants that job can just focus on that one part of it. The 2 dispatchers, we've already talked about, but they are just we're trying to get the shifts to the point that the supervisors in those on each shift can actually do more supervising, quality control. So that will help get us to that point. The admin clerk, one of the main things that we've seen an increase in, we've had 20% increase in records requests over the past 5 years. And actually it's a little bit higher now than that number, but that continues to grow. And again, it becomes more and more complex because we have more and more video and audio and everything else. So it takes longer to put all that information together and get it sent out. Originally, we had cut that position when we went to a less paper type records management system. But now with the increased records requests, it just pushed us over that limit of being able to effectively and timely respond to the needs of those requests. The cuts that we decided on, other than the dispatcher, was the evidence tech. Part of the reasoning behind that, when we started to see that cuts were going to be necessary, that position fills a couple of roles. It fills the evidence tech. As a sworn officer, it fills the evidence tech, and it also serves as bailiff for court. So we would still have an issue with, now where do we pull a bailiff from to serve in that? And it's a part-time position, Monday through Thursday in the morning. So we would still have to find a way to supplement that position. So leaving that evidence tech as a sworn does give us that flexibility to use them. And then the 3 sworn positions was more of a package concept, as we described in the budget tour. It was designed to be more of a special enforcement team, and that team would be assigned to problem areas. So if we get complaints about traffic issues, if we know we have a special event going on, we can assign that team. They can schedule accordingly. It reduces some of the overtime by paying just normal wages, and we can resolve problems. Now we struggle to accomplish that because most of the scheduled days are just going call to call, and you don't really get the opportunity to just sit and do some proactive activity in the community. So that's a breakdown on all the positions we had in the budget for requests this year.
And Mr. Mayor, while the police chief is here, it's interesting because I've heard 3 different people that I don't know well. It's been just kind of people in the community who have all said, oh, when the new city hall is online, the police department will be moving into this portion of the building. You know, that decision has not been made. You know, that's something to consider, but that decision has not been made. And I believe in your budget requests, there you had a larger consulting ask, and I think part of that probably is for a consultant to look at this building. Am I correct in that?
That is correct. And just to be clear, Mr. Mayor, council members, there is some money in there to just help determine, does this building work?
Right.
I think we tried to show how disruptive the workflow is and cumbersome to get things from one place to another, and probably more so now because part of City Hall is in between the 2 parts of our building. But it from a workflow standpoint and the makeup of how this building currently exists, I don't know, without major reconstruction, I don't know how you fix some of those issues. But hopefully that consultant can answer some of that.
And, you know, I've shared with a few people, I'm not shy about my concern about hiring too many consultants, and I think that there are others in our community that have that feeling, but yet I think it is necessary to hire consultants when we don't have people on staff, and I doubt that most of your staff are probably qualified in doing building assessments, so.
I am not.
I have no further questions.
Any other questions for our chief at this time? Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Lisa asking about the administrative clerk and the public information officer, because those are 2 of my concerns. I don't ever think I have ever been hesitant to add manpower, person power to the police or fire departments, but I was close to that. But I think you've taken care of that. You've taken care of my concerns. In terms of adding 3 uniformed officers, I think that's really necessary. I personally would also favor adding at least 1 more investigator. But the problem I have is that we can't fill the positions we have now. If we're operating at 85%, it doesn't make much sense to add more positions when we're not going to fill them. I mean, that's the reality we're unfortunately dealing with. So, you know, I just want to go on record as saying I think we need more officers on the street. I think we need more investigators. But if we can't find the people, and that's not unique to us, it's a national trend. It's a national problem. People aren't going into public service and public safety like they used to. So it doesn't make sense to ask for more if those positions will never be filled. The one thing about the special kind of unit you spoke about, or added people who could target an area or something, is that frequently we get complaints. We were walking a couple nights ago, and a resident in the neighborhood complained or asked if we could put a cop with a speed gun on the street, because people drive up the street. fast. I don't think there's a street in Minot where that doesn't happen. And we don't have the resources for that. I think in the Scotland Yard area, in the old days, you used to call it a flying squad, where they could dispatch a group of people to an area where there was a lot of crime, or there were nuisance kinds of issues, or quality of life issues, like people speeding or making noise or whatever. And that's a complaint we frequently get. Could you target? And my answer is yes, we could, but that means we take somebody off of duty elsewhere. It's not a permanent solution. So I like the idea very much of a targeted force, 1 or 2 or even 3 officers that we could assign to give tighter control. Again, I would suggest that, but if we can't fill our current positions, I don't know it does us any good. I am satisfied with the request for an administrative clerk. The PIO I'm a little hesitant about, but I'm not into social media, and you tell us that that's very prevalent and that people communicate and give you tips and ask for information, and that's the way people find out of what's happening in the community. So I will defer to your more millennial judgment and knowledge of how people communicate. That was the only one I had pause about. But the rest of it seems very reasonable. I'm particularly also pleased with the idea that you, in your rationale, in justification for it, talk about having the officers do the law enforcement work and trying to, in a sense, privatize as much of the behind-the-scenes work to civilian people who you may not have as much of a recruitment problem with, might not have as much of a turnover problem with, and who would be easier to find. And make the law enforcement job much more law enforcement. I really like that way of looking at it. So I'm satisfied.
Any other questions for our chief at this time? Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Alderwoman Olson, did you have any furthers while we were
Certainly,
on?
I'd call the fire chief up. I want to spread the love around a little bit. Everybody come up. Tell us a little bit about the captain's position that you are requesting.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Olson, and the rest of council, the request that I put in was to retain the training officer position that I currently have. When we did a restructure and I brought it forward to our city manager and to HR, I was going to eliminate the training officer position and lower the position of assistant chief down to a battalion chief level, increase the position of captain up to a battalion chief, and just have 2 administrative battalion chiefs. There has been a lot of things that have happened over the last year and a half, 2 years since that reorganization was decided, and we've gotten busier and busier. And the training piece of it, we've, obviously need that training position, but the administrative side has gotten busier and busier. We've done more grants. We've been successful in grants, but with those grants, when you're successful, you have to, execute them, and there's a lot of purchasing, and with the change of our finance purchasing process, that is really gone to administration, is taken a lot more of our time. We're going to be adding another fire station, which is going to add more people and everything else. And we've just seen how much administration has really gotten tasked with a lot of things. Over the last year, with the increase of overtime because of the COVID testing and everything else, so much had come back to administration. The days of old, everybody in the station had a job and was doing many, many different things to keep the place running. It's really had to come back to administration to do a lot of it because we just don't have the time. Our call volume is way up this year. And we just keep watching everything get busier and busier. So that's why I asked to retain that position.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could continue, the police chief just mentioned that possibly sharing that PIO position would be an option. I'd like to hear kind of your opinion on that as well.
Well, when we talked about it, we talked, after hours. We don't have our PIO in the city, but, our operation runs 24/7. So on the weekends, we don't get our press releases out in a timely fashion. Sometimes we need something pushed out sooner than Monday morning or, waiting if I need to have our community to know that we've blocked off an area of town due to an evacuation, or maybe we're utilizing hydrants. So I just would like to have more of a timely fashion as we're getting reports out. So that's why when we talked about that. So.
Well, thank you.
Alderman Janser.
Oh, yeah. Chief, so is this captain position, would that be a promotion internally, or is that somebody that would be an outside hire, or where would that person come from?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Janser, it's currently in place right now. He's the one that I promoted a few years ago to be able to do our training because we didn't have a training officer and we were struggling, with all of our turnover. So he's currently in place. He was going to go back to the trucks and fill in a captain's position that we currently have open right now. But if we get to keep this position, then he'll just stay in that position where he's at right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Fire Chief? Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. Could you give us an update on the progress toward that north side station and whether the budget in any way impedes that or helps that?
We currently are still on track to start construction next spring. We are finalizing all the plans, and as far as I've been told, the money is in the budget to go to bid in January. We're hoping to, we've adjusted the budget based on, our construction costs going up, so that has all been adjusted. We are currently on track for everything. We did do a little bit different work as far as our needed engine that we will need for that station. We're actually looking at a lease purchase option, which will allow us to get it sooner at a reduced upfront cost than to have the $600,000 into the budget. So we've been looking at some creative ways to reduce some of the costs. But yeah, everything's on target right now.
So in terms of the engine, it would still be the same engine, the same specifications and use. It would just be a novel, a creative purchase lease option.
Yep.
I didn't realize you could lease a fire truck and then.
Yeah.
That's nifty. That's
Yeah.
nifty.
Ew.
Okay, so no need for extra money, and the money that's allocated will be spent. And so looking at a completion date or entering into service date of when?
We're looking at about July, August of '23 is what I'm hoping.
Thank you.
We would not be putting on those firefighters any sooner than we had to.
Right.
Probably be 2 to 3 months before the station opened. We'd be hiring just 3.
Thank you.
Chief, if I could follow up even from Alderman Patagula, and that was going to be a question for me. As we've considered 5-year budgets in the past, as we look down the road with the new fire station and reworking kind of the manning of these fire stations, are we expecting more firefighters down the road than what we currently have in this budget or what is planned in the next couple of years as, as the community grows?
Mr. Mayor, that is something that I'm obviously looking at. That growth to the south has really changed our response times. I will actually be putting something together for our city manager on that very question, and we can make sure that we get it out to all of you and showing you the response times on how they're slowing down on the south end. I did look at some creative ways of moving headquarters station, possibly, for example, Minot Rural's station, moving into something like that. What it does is it opens a big hole where we're currently at. So we're just playing kind of whack-a-mole on that. I did talk with our city manager about some things that I've kind of been kicking around, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. And I have some ideas, but I'm not ready to present them tonight. But yeah, at some point we might need to add, but I'm definitely looking at the budget as far as that. People are expensive, and adding a fire station is expensive. But growth of a city, when it gets so sprawled out, it's really hard for fire protection. So maybe there's some things we can do.
Thank you, Chief. Any further questions at this time?
I'm ready
Alder-
the finance manager, if everyone else is talking.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thanks.
Alderwoman Evans.
Dave has all the hard questions. Hey, Dave, so last year with the health insurance increases, I know we went into the reserve in the self-funded insurance fund. How much is in reserves right now for the self-funded insurance plan? Approximate, I don't know, but
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, it's around $3 million.
so has it been considered, you know, because the 22% increase, right, for that we're going to, employees are going to have to absorb, have we thought about using some of the reserves to offset these premium increases?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, we have. And as a matter of fact, some of this increase is due to not passing along an increase last year.
Right.
With the COVID and a number of other things, you know, the premium estimates weren't out to us in time to pass through with the preliminary budget. And we were overfunded in our self-funded insurance fund. So we opted to move forward without an increase last year. A couple of things have happened, and one of them being is the cost of insurance is continuing to increase, and we also had poor experience with our claims in the past year. So we actually processed more in claims than we funded into that fund for premiums. So we actually decreased the fund balance slightly. So, you know, obviously we can't continue to do that. So we had to pass along or build this into the budget for the increase. So this is kind of, you know, last year's increase and this year's increase all coming at the same time.
But we still have $3 million in this reserve fund.
That is correct.
Right. So are we open, like, I mean, I get, like, you know, having the employees having to pay some portion of the premium, but it just seems to me with $3 million being in this reserve fund that, you know, we are working to improve our employee retention and benefits, that helping offset some of the cost of these increases could be put on the table, you know, a percentage of the increase instead of, you know, that's quite a huge adjustment for employees to absorb.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, what's built into this budget is the city's cost of the city's portion of the health insurance premiums. This is not the necessarily the employee's portion.
What we pay for the employee, right?
Exactly.
Mr. City Manager had a comment on this as well.
If I may, how much do we average paying in claims every year? So
How much?
5 million.
Oh, $5 million.
About 5 million. So that reserve there is to help you float that when you have a bad year. So if we go from 5 million claims this year to 6 or 7 million, that 3 million is your reserve to catch and float that. So if you start using that $3 million reserves to, and trust me, I appreciate your concern for the burden on the employees, but if you don't have that reserve there, you begin bouncing checks, or you're transferring money from the general fund into the health insurance fund to pay those bills because you don't have enough there. And the recommendation for this change comes from the analysis by Blue Cross Blue Shield in looking at how much we have in the reserve, what our trends are with paying out claims, and their concern that we run a real risk of not, that $3 million not being enough money if we have another bad year or an increased bad year to cover that. And so it's not like we're sitting on $3 million with no use for it. It's there as a protective measure that we can pay claims if we continue to have even higher claim experience than what we've had in the past. And if you delineate that down, if you go from 3 million to 2 million, when you're running $5 million a year in claims, that can go very, very quickly.
Alderman Patagula.
Following up on that, speaking of protection, where does reinsurance enter into this? I guess one of I accept very much the argument that we need to have reserves. What my nightmare scenario is a catastrophic event of some kind, or a series of major injuries or illnesses Healthcare is really expensive. $3 million doesn't go a whole lot, frankly. So do we have reinsurance in there figured in?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padrigula, we do have, part of our self-funded insurance program through Blue Cross and Blue Shield is stop-loss coverage through Blue Cross as well.
So that protects us from some catastrophic series of claims, hopefully?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's a $20,000 stopgap, right?
I believe
Stop-loss.
it's 25,000.
No, is it?
25,000.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, 20,000.
20. Oh.
Is that for one specific claim or one date of service or what? The 25,000 stop loss?
Lisa just needs to come. Oh, you don't.
I wouldn't know if it's per person or if it's for a specific event.
I believe it's per claim. That's what 2 city employees have told me.
Whoa.
Per claim event is more likely the answer.
Okay, thank you.
It just using the numbers, we have a little over 400 employees, and some of them, not all of them, are on our insurance program. But assuming that a majority of them are, and $25,000 per employee, that adds up. And obviously, we're not going to reach our stop loss on every single employee. But part of the services that Blue Cross and Blue Shield does for us is analyzing our prior trends, what's coming up in the industry, what they expect, or what we would anticipate for claims being paid out in the upcoming year, and they give us the recommendation for what the premiums need to be. The city has the plan that is in place is they pay a percentage of that premium as part of the employees' benefits, and the city pays the remainder amount. And that's how come the budget was impacted so much in this budget cycle.
Thank you.
This may be a you question or a Ms. Junk question. So in the first line of the summary, the regular employees, it was a 7.54% increase. And I looked back at 2021, and it was a 1.5%, and 2020 was a 1.3%. What significantly changed that we're now at 7.5? The state is doing a 1.5% increase, and the military is at 2.7 for 2022. So I'm just wondering what accounts for that percent increase.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, that's a combination of a number of things. We added a significant number of new positions in this proposed budget. There were a number of positions that had market adjustments recommended, as well as normal progression through the salary system that we have, either steps or grades.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for our finance director at this time? Thank you, Dave. I'm sure if we have more, we'll look to you. Alderwoman Evans, do you have any further lines of questioning?
No, I have a Mr. Meyer question. You may have answered this when I was absent for the tours. And maybe it just got moved around from another line. Let me get to my engineering tab. The street alleys and road MCTE thing as the 200,000, was that in another category at some point? Because it was at 0 for last year, now it's 200,000, so it's a 100% increase?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, what that is our street striping budget.
Okay.
It used to be in paint, thinners, and markers, and
Okay.
and now they moved it into here.
Is that what happened too with that signs and markers category too?
Yeah, it's been switched around a little bit.
Okay,
but
that's
the
what I
bud-
figured, I just wanted to
Primarily
confirm
stayed
that.
the same.
Great. See, that's all I got.
Sure.
Any questions for Lance while he's up at the podium? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Evans, if
I'm
you have any
done.
further, but I see Dave coming
Oh,
back up
Dave's
for some
coming.
clarification.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to bring up a little bit of information. And
Sure.
as Jenna pointed out, this is in our annual report on our employee health benefits. The coverage that we have through Blue Cross Blue Shield, the stop loss coverage pays all claims in excess of $20,000 per year per employee with a $2,634,500 lifetime employee maximum.
Okay.
But the city, and the city's insurer pays all aggregate claims in excess of $3,161,400. So there's a number of moving pieces that come into play with all of this.
I do have another question.
All right.
What, are we doing away with tuition reimbursements? How come that was 0 for this year? Like it was 8,000 last year and we have 0. Are we expecting not to reimburse any city staff for tuition this year?
I'm going to defer to Lisa.
I knew I'd get you up here, Lisa.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, that is actually under the education budget. We still have $16,000 in tuition reimbursement. It's just all under the education budget
So
for
we
the
just
HR
move some
department.
stuff
It's just been
around.
moved
Okay,
around.
great. I just wanted to make sure we're still.
Yep, it is still there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, I'm really done now.
Well, now that Mr. Lakefield or maybe Lisa sat down, I might ask the question of at what point, looking at how the state handles their health insurance premiums and even the counties and other folks, at what point, looking at a 20% plus increase this year, at what point does a self-funded health insurance program become unaffordable down the road? As we've been working on 5-year budget and things like that, and Lisa, I'm not looking for a profound answer by any means, but at what point down the road, specific to the city employees, do we have to start weighing out on whether or not we need to look out to Sanford or to a different option?
Mr. Mayor and Council, that has come up for discussion, and we are looking at other options for insurance. We do have a good plan for our employees. I think there might be some other options that we can look at that could also help us with our costs. Maybe some other options for individuals with some high deductible options for younger people with an option to choose that, mostly because they don't go to the doctor very often. So there are some things that we can look at to hopefully, significantly save us on money. We have had Blue Cross and Blue Shield is going to propose some different options to us. Unfortunately, we get all of our information in July, so it's not going to help us for next year. But next year, as we come to our budget, we should have that information for everybody else. So,
all right, thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. City Manager.
If I may respond to that a little bit. So if I understand your question, are you asking whether there should be a point that we move away from being self-insured?
That is part of the question on at what point does self-insurance become unaffordable?
So in my experience, there's a few different things, and I guess my response to that would be is your self-insured program is always your most affordable. Most communities are working towards coming off of a fully insured program to try and get to a self-insured program, because that's where you're going to see more stability. You're going to see less increases. I would gather to say that if you have a 28% increase in self-insured, which again is based off of your claims history, you're probably looking north of 40% increase in a fully insured program with the same claim history, because you're asking the insurance. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, but you're asking for the insurance provider to bear that risk, where in a self-insured program, the city is bearing more of that risk. And so we're paying for that. And the challenge then would be is if you want to look at changing providers, such as going from Blue Cross Blue Shield to United or something like that, they're still going to look at that same claim history data to give you your quote. And they may give you a short-term savings, but over the long term, you're going to catch up with that. And this kind of goes back to the conversation I had earlier when I presented the proposed budget, was there's some things we can do and look at, but really the best way you're already on the best plan to help manage and sustain your health insurance with a fully self-insured program. It doesn't get any better than that. So now what we need to do is we need to focus more on employee wellness and how we have an employee wellness program that's aggressive, that our employees are participating in, and those types of things to help them manage that better so that we reduce that claim history. And as we start getting better claims history years, that cost theoretically goes down. And I've had some good experience in previous communities in helping do some of that. But in all the communities I've been in, we're typically helping them transition from a fully insured program towards a self-insured program. And all that has to do with how much risk you want to have and how much you can afford. But I don't know that there's a better insurance program out there for employees than self-insured. And not to sound like the doomsday guy, but really your only other alternative if self-insurance doesn't work, your only other alternative is not to provide health insurance benefits to your employees, which I don't think is a road we want to go down. So we got to figure out how to manage these claims histories better, because that's what's driving our cost.
Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Look around the dice for any other folks that have any of their aldermen, alderwomen who have questions here on the budget, or maybe comments too. Alderman Pittner, we'll jump over here.
No questions. Everybody's done a great job of justifying and providing context for their positions and their asks within the budget. And you know, dating back to even the budget workshops that we all went on, they were all great. They're very, I really couldn't see anything in this budget that really wasn't discussed within those workshops, which was great. And it's a practice that I hope continues. And again, I think the justification is there for every one of these positions that have been asked for. However, as being a steward of not only the city but in the city of Minot, but as our community, I find myself in a position that I find it hard to approve this budget when it comes time. Because of one of the other glaring issues that face our community, as far as being a collaborative partner with our other tax entities in the school board and the school bond issue that is very, very prevalent in our community. I'd like to see us maintain a flat mill levy. I would like to not see an increase. Again, my thoughts. Because it was alluded to at our last meeting as well, that if we approve an $882,000 budget increase, we are essentially locking ourselves into another budget increase next year of somewhere between $400,000 to $500,000 to cover the entire year of these prorated salaries. You know, when I look at what Minot is set up for, and I think it is set up to grow very organically over the next handful of years, and maybe sometime between now, or between, I guess, last year and our next census, which we didn't make the 50,000 citizen mark. And I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like we would have been even closer to that 50,000, if not surpass it, if we did have another high school. I think we would retain more people. I think the quality of life goes beyond just having another high school for kids to go to. Alderman Padragula and I were very critical with the Minot School Board putting portables up at Jim Hill. I can, in good conscience, I don't think, come with an increase to taxpayers and take away from maybe some of the campaign that the school board will have to do to get a school bond passed, and be critical and say they need to come up with a solution if I'm not willing to be a partner in that collaborative effort and hold the line if possible. Again, I don't think any one of these positions, I don't think asks within this budget are unreasonable. I really don't. I think they're all justified. I think you could probably add 30 positions and they could all be justified within this budget. I think we have great staff that do great with what they have. And again, if I have to provide a direction for staff, that would be mine, is that we hold the line, we eat the 2 meals and change. And again, we don't see an increase to taxpayers, because when I meet with citizens and we talk about the challenges facing our community, if there's ever a time to hold the line, now is it, in my opinion. I believe that, you know, when we talk to citizens and you talk to them and they say, I don't have kids, I don't need a new school, or my taxes are high enough already. You know, again, it goes beyond that. It goes to the doctors and the professors that I show homes to that want to move into our community, that might be interviewing for a job at Trinity, and then when they ask to go by the school that their child will attend, and it's surrounded with portables, it's just leaves a bad taste. And again, there's a point where we worry about the city of Minot and how we run our organization, and we do that very well, I believe. And I believe the staff does that very well as a council member and a steward of the entire community, and the community as a whole. I think now that's something that I'd like to see, and right now that's where I'm at as as a fellow council member, I think it should be known where I stand by my fellow aldermen and alderwomen that are sitting here with me. That's where that's where I would like to see us. Again, every one of these positions is justified, and I'm not saying that the positions need to be cut. I get there's not a whole lot of fat on this in these budgets to trim. I get that. But just like when I was a kid, my parents told me no a lot when there was things that I wanted and maybe probably even needed and probably could have justified. And right now I'm leaning towards saying no. So
with property taxes in this proposed budget accounting for $26,540,638, a number of positions that have all been represented here, and I think I can't think of a single department that doesn't need staff. We're taking a look at, within this budget itself, for the old pension plan. This is the old retirement plan. Out of that $26 million, $26.54 million, 7.81 is going towards an old pension plan, retirement plan. Very much just like we're locking in flood funding for a very long time, 30 and 40 years. These are all debt services that we have to account for, which is why we talk about a five-year budgeting plan, which is still pretty short. Really, the onus comes on us. If we don't want an increase, and for the public's understanding when we talk about increase, $4.79 a month. That is what we're referencing out of this budget. Yes, that does also account for what it would be anticipated, another increase similar the following year. But that is what we're talking about. We have also made a commitment individually in separate meetings, and myself very much so, about the importance of a new school. If this budget isn't good enough, Alderman Pittner, we certainly will be looking for motions on where to cut, because it is up to us to find a budget that each one of us can agree to that is acceptable, and make those motions to cut. And certainly if we can't all agree on what those it is going to be a majority that approves it. But from what has been presented, I just do want to remind, it is up to each one of us. If we're not sufficient with what has been provided here, let's identify what it is that will make it agreeable then. So I will be looking up on the first reading for some suggestions, and also public input as well. These are very difficult pages and pages and pages, volumes of numbers to understand, but certainly that's where we hope that you come with questions to us long even before the first reading, or even reaching out to the city manager on really what some of this means. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So our next scheduled meeting to discuss this is the first reading of the budget. And at that point, certainly the citizens will be able to come to us and ask questions and give comments. But I did throw out an idea of possibly having just a budget work session, not a session that we're going to take action at, but there's a lot of things to discuss in here. And, if it would be the consensus of this body to be able to put that together prior to first reading, I think it would be helpful.
Alderwoman Evans.
To facilitate that, I'd like to do then a motion to direct the city clerk to find an agreeable meeting time for a budget work session. Is that what it's called? That the majority of city council members could attend, so we can focus exclusively on the budget before first reading. So that's my very long motion, but in a nutshell, Kelly finds the time that works for all of us.
We have a motion and a second on that, basically calling for a special city council meeting.
Yes.
For specific discussion on budget.
Yes.
Okay. Discussion on that is, I'm supportive of it. I certainly don't want to tax the city staff with sitting through 6 hours of every single line item, but I think it's worthwhile, at least for the leadership, to discuss where the priorities are. We've had those discussions as well. I'm sure the CM and other folks would wouldn't mind answering a few questions. But this would also be an opportunity for the public to reach out to individual elected council members or myself to even bring some of those questions forward to get their own answers ahead of the first reading. It can be very intimidating standing in front of everyone asking some of those difficult questions. So an opportunity there. We'll ask Kelly to try to find a date that works for the majority, and if we can't get everybody there, so be it. But we'll do our best. Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm supportive of this motion because I think we have some work to do here. And kind of coming at it from a little different angle than Alderman Pittner expressed, I think we need to be really careful that we don't start committing ourselves beyond the current time frame and beyond our means. When we're adding enough positions, 18 new positions and 4 that convert from part-time to full-time, that indeed probably locks us into a mill levy increase in the next cycle. And the methodology of partial funding of some positions or a significant number of those positions in the 22 budget, and then having to deal with the full impact of that in the next cycle, to my mind, isn't a particularly good way to go. And so I think we need to do some work on how we can navigate this through 22 and then deal with, in fact, a year from now, what's necessary for 2023. So I'm in favor of the motion to have a work session.
And one point as well is the previous item, two previous before here, on the RFQ process. The only other way we offset expenses by adding revenue. And there's 2 ways of adding revenue, either economic bolstering, growth from within, or mill levies. And certainly, I think we all know where we'd rather see revenue increase. So I agree, Alderman Janser. Further discussion on the motion that is made for a special city council meeting for a budget discussion workshop. Any further discussion on that? Last call. We do have a motion. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes, motion is approved. We are still within the budget Q&A. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you cited some numbers. I think it was $4 and some odd change per month. Again, we're not talking about, 18%, 19, 20% increases. We're talking about, and in reality, we're talking about kind of cleaning some things up, if I'm correct, clerically, with reimbursement that we had to dip into reserves last year to cover. So again, when I think of this and I think of the campaign that other taxing entities are going to have to do, Alderman Padragula had stated he's not really on social media, but a lot of people are. And a lot of people will, when it comes to a school bond vote, they will look and they will say, coming to me for more money. The county increased, the city, and I don't know what the county's doing at this point, but the city increased. The city, everybody's dipping into my pockets. I'm not for another increase somewhere, and I don't want to give citizens and voting citizens that excuse or that out. I want them to look at the merits of what this community needs and vote based on the merits of what this community needs. And that is what this community needs, is another school. We need to do better for our children. We need to do better for our parents, our staff in those areas. Again, I'm a city council member talking about some of these other taxing entity needs, but it's what our community needs as a whole to grow organically, and not rely on an oil boom in order to see people come to our community. So again, I just want to be clear, and I think Derek's done a good job of really putting those numbers out there and people to wrap their heads around what these increases really mean if it is approved as such. You're talking about $4 a month. You're talking about less than a Starbucks coffee a month in order to cover some of these increases. So again, I just want to make sure that that's known by the public, and we need to do a good job of educating what these things mean and what people are getting for their property tax bill. So.
Further discussion on our Q&A, Alderman Janser.
I would be grateful if in preparation for this proposed meeting, that the city manager and the staff would, in some manner, rank these 18 positions that are proposed as we look at the potential to try to make cuts. It's very difficult, as Paul pointed out a few minutes ago, and as we've stated and observed from our budget tours and those activities, there's justification for every one of these. But taken as a whole, and for the city as a whole, what's more important now? Is it a police public information officer, or is it a heavy equipment operator out in public works? Or is it a utility operator at the water plant? And it's very, it's difficult for us to make those choices and try to rack and stack that. And so I think, in coming to us with a list of 18, it makes it very difficult to come to a conclusion. And so I would be desirous of some prioritization, if you will, or priority by position recommendation.
Further discussion, Alderwoman Evans.
Give me an idea, Mark. So I think Paul brings up very good issue about really seriously figuring out as a body what we need to do to help our partner organization at the school board, get this new high school, and really being creative and turning over every rock to figure out if we can hold the mill, steady for 2022. So to that end, I think we have it in here, but if maybe it's just a one sheet that the finance or city manager is all of the funds and what the reserve amounts are in those funds, just so we have a clear, I just want everything on the table. I don't want to go to we have to find this in the 18 positions kind of thing. I think we need to sort of see everything that's available and how we get the budget we want and need, and if there is any potential to offset an increase this year.
Before Dave runs up to the podium here, I will mention too, it's not only a tall order, but somewhat deceiving, as many of those reserve funds are already dedicated towards things, whether it be debt services or what have you. So
I would just want that in there, right? If it's, we have $6 million of reserves in X fund, but 5.9 million is allotted for this, so we get the whole picture.
And part of that too, Mr. Lakefield and Alderwoman Evans, is also where our reserves and our bond ratings come off of grading on what we do have in reserve, so that we also to understand if we choose to dip into reserves, that could affect our bottom line when we go out to market to try to pull debt for something as simple as a street or flood control too. But Mr. Lakefield.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, that is information that we're required to publish every year. We have published that in the Minot Daily News as of December 31st of 2020. We can certainly bring that information. We also track on an expanded spreadsheet what we have programmed in our 5-year budget looking forward. Currently, under the city ordinance, we're required to maintain a 1/12 reserve in each fund. We have expanded that. General accepted principles are maybe 30% reserves. So we do allocate additional funding for reserves. Some of these funds are restricted in their use. They can only be used for certain projects or certain uses. So we do track all that information. We certainly can share that with you.
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
But I just, you know, like Paul said, like this is a very unique year, right, with the school bond issue coming. And I think we committed to at our retreat in helping to, be good partners with the other governing bodies, of the city. And I think this is going to hurt, right? This is, but we also have to keep our eyes on the prize of what a new high school means for our city and its future. So I want us to get creative and just have everything on the table so we can do this, and help our partners and help our kids.
Mr. City Manager.
So I agree and am supportive of doing an additional work session. However, I do want to kind of go back a little bit and remind the council some of the principles and concepts we talked about in the retreat as far as the role of council, the role of staff, those types of things. I think what staff is asking for is a general direction from council. I don't know, we're necessarily coming to you and asking you to balance the budget for us. We're asking direction of, if this does not meet your expectations, what are those? And then we can go back and do our work to bring you back a budget that meets those expectations. I think the thing that we're falling on right here now is, and again, I always tell people this, that staff moves at the speed and the direction of a majority of the council. So if the majority of the council feels that that they want to have a commitment to being a strong community partner and try to give the school district the best opportunity they have to pass a bond issue, which translates in effect to no mill levy increase, staff can take that direction, right? And come back to you with some proposed changes to the budget that meets that goal and objective. I don't know that it's going to be very beneficial, and I don't know that it's going to be very efficient, and I think it may even create some morale issues with staff if we start getting into a meeting where council is going through line by line and looking for areas to cut. Because in essence, what you're doing is you're doing our role of bringing a prepared budget to you. And so my personal preference would be is I would prefer a directive from the council that you're in agreement of no mill levy increase, and then my staff and I can go back and work on bringing back a budget that meets that expectation. I will tell you that we've been working on this for several months. We've gone from 24 asked positions to 18. We've reached a little bit of a standstill. I think Dave and I did a pretty good job of pushing and pushing and pushing on reducing some of these. We've gone through the prioritization process, at least with each different department through that. At this point, I think we're running into a point where I don't know that, departments are going to have a hard time letting go some of it. I think it's coming to a point that if the council doesn't want to approve a 2 mil increase, the finance director and I can meet together, prioritize those positions, come back with some recommendations. 2 mils difference is about $400,000. I can come back to you with a recommendation at the work session with how we meet that $400,000 cut and what that means. We can answer any additional questions, those types of things. But I just don't think it's going to be very productive to sit in a meeting and have the council go through. We've provided you a pretty extensive report here with the budget in condition with other reports and those types of things. You have the proposed budget that we presented at the last council meeting, which included showing that we're already dipping into reserves in the tune of almost just shy of $3 million to make this budget work. Again, that money came from savings from last year's budget. So all that information is there. And I agree there's still some work to do. That maybe some of the public's like, well, if you think there's still more cutting to do, why did you propose this budget? I proposed this budget because I think there's value in having this public conversation about what the needs of our organization are. So when we approve a no mill increase, if that's the directive of the council, what does that mean? What's the impact of this organization and the services we can provide? I wanted to have a very public conversation about that. I'm totally fine if the council, and I agree with the concept. I think I vocalized that during my presentation, that we need to be good community partners and try to give the school bond issue its best opportunity to pass because of the impacts that it can have on our community moving forward, as has been well articulated this evening. But I just need that directive from council, or whether or not we're doing the mill levy. And if we have more work to do, staff can go and do that work and bring it back to you and tell you what the impacts of that is to the budget. At the end of the day, we can't be all things to all people, right? And all of these are significant needs within this in this ask. And there's a lot of things that were already cut that were significant needs. But at the end of the day, we can only afford to do what we can afford to do. And so my preference and my ask would be is some consensus from the council with regard to the mill levy question, and then staff can bring back a recommended budget that meets that expectation at the next work session.
Mr. City Manager, I would expect that the work session was exactly that premise, to get to a zero increase. I'd look around the dais if there's any other opinion that thinks otherwise, to get to that, and look for those recommendations from staff or from you and the finance director. Does anybody have a different opinion on that? That's what this work session is geared towards, is a 0 mil increase?
Mr. City Manager, were you looking for something a bit more formal than that?
Yes, I'm looking for a formal direction,
Okay.
because I've heard a few individuals, but I haven't heard a full consensus. I mean, I can guess what the consensus is, but I prefer that more formalized.
So I'll make the motion that we direct the city manager and staff to come to the budget work session, contemplation of no mill increase and what that would look like, a $400,000 reduction, and what that would look like, and in different ways, because I don't think it just can look one way. I mean, there's different variations of it, but.
Second.
We'll look for a recommendation on a 0 mil increase. Motion by Alderwoman Evans, second by Pittner. Discussion on that motion. Now that the media has gone, by the way. Mr. Finance Director.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to point out and make sure that we're all on the same page here, that this is a bit of a moving target because we're operating under an estimated valuation, and also we're estimating what we think we will get paid for the veterans credits and the homestead credits. So the final mill levy may be different than what is anticipated. So that's a little bit of a guessing game. We could end up lower than we were the prior year. So, I mean, we could essentially erode our mill levy over a number of years. It's just one of the things we want to make sure everyone understands. It is a bit of a moving target based on a number of different estimates.
Perhaps down the road, we could put a little more emphasis on the state to get us a more defined ability to narrow this up.
Yeah, and just for clarification purposes as well, what we're estimating here and what was proposed in the preliminary budget, when we net off the veterans credits and the homestead credits, should net off to be very similar to what was asked for in last year's budget, which was different slightly based on some calculation changes. So essentially what was being proposed was a flat mill rate compared to what was asked for last year.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Thank you, Dave. Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I just wanted to speak to that, the workshop. That's what I want to see from staff. I don't want to get in the weeds. I don't want to tell departments what they can and cannot ask for when it comes to ranking those. If they want more staff and they want to keep those positions, then that's up to you guys. That's up to staff and cutting other areas. I don't want to get into the weeds and go line by line. That's not our job as a council. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. But if we need direction, I'm very in favor of that, of this motion. I will support it. I get it. I even stated earlier, it's a clerical cleanup with the homestead credit and getting levying that dollars from taxes and getting a rebate back on the tail end. I get that, but what we need as a community is for the headline to say that the council holds the line and that we're not seeing an increase from council. That's what we need, and that's why I'll support it.
Alderman Patagula.
I think ultimately, before I vote on the budget, I'd like to get some information. I think somebody in passing mentioned that we need to do our share, and I agree. But I'd also like to know, and I'd like to have some information on what the county has done. I think they've adopted a budget, and I'd also like to know what the school system has done and also what the park district has done. In the past, the voters have set significant limits on what some of those organizations have wanted. And if we are going to be looking at the whole picture, I'd like to know what they've already decided. That's really important. And I don't expect city staff to be monitoring the other agency's business, but I'd like to have that information, at our next budget meeting. That one point aside, I think that, this way, I'm reluctant to commit myself to no increase, because I think that's what's gotten us into trouble before. We've tried to act nice, we've tried to save people money, and it's come back to cost us more money. I think our previous city manager showed very clearly and persuasively, and our current city manager has repeated the lesson that if we scrimp and save too much, it costs us more in the end. If we don't maintain our roads, if we don't provide adequate benefits and salaries to our staff, if we don't provide adequate leadership, people leave, there's more turnover, the roads deteriorate and cost us more in the end. So I think ultimately it's, from my point of view, a short-sighted kind of decision. I can see there'd be times where we want to be pretty minimal in terms of what we ask from the voters and taxpayers. And I think we've done a good job. I don't think too good a job. I think what we've done is held back on many of these things for years, and now the needs are pretty significant. 18 positions sounds like a lot. I've voiced some skepticism about some of those positions, and I'd like to see some more information about some of them. But I'm not willing to lock myself into saying, no mill levy. We're talking about $400,000, as Alderman Pittner said. Most of that is a technical kind of readjustment of how we bill for the money in terms of what the county's been collecting. I think there are things we can do on an ongoing basis to be more efficient, to save money. We've started doing some of those. We've invested a lot of money, for example, in computer software systems that should help us be more efficient. So I think there are. I've listed 4 or 5 things I can talk about at the budget session in terms of kind of trying to keep things down. But government costs. It costs like any other service. When we go to Walmart or Target or whatever, we don't expect the prices to always stay the same. If we go up, maybe we economize on a different brand or something. But I find it strange that government should lock itself into, commit itself to never raising things unless the overall economy improves and we get more tax revenues. I don't know whether the businesses would do that. The other comment I wanted to make at this point is that we've just hired a new city manager, and we hired him for his worldliness, if I may use that expression, in terms of other city governments. We've hired him for his novel perspective from being from outside. In the past year or two, we've seen a great growth in the quality of our staff and how they look at things and how they make decisions and how they operate together as a team, particularly the management team. And I think if our city manager, whom we hired to tell us the truth, to be honest with us, says we need this, I'm certainly inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. And if we keep taking, or if we start taking from him, we haven't kept it yet, but if we start keeping from him and his staff things they feel they need, I think that puts us on a risky path. We've invested in Mr. Stewart, we've invested in our management team, we've invested in all of our staff, and I think it would be a bit questionable to pull the rug out from under them. I'm certainly willing to look at some cuts. I'm certainly willing to look at some efficiencies, but I'm not willing to commit myself to not raising anything, particularly when I don't know factually what the other governmental bodies have already decided. Somewhere I have the recollection the county increased their mill levy significantly, but I could be wrong on that, so I want some numbers. But I want us to have a discussion session, and I'm going to be cautious about making significant cuts.
Just for your sake, Alderman Patagula, the preliminary budgets will be mailed out to all county residents across the state here very shortly, and the county and the parks both did show increases on their preliminaries. However, their finals obviously are not done, neither is ours, but just for your information, and some of that can be provided. Have we, it's coming up on 8 o'clock. Do we have any other budget issues? Alderwoman Evans.
So I just want to clarify, my motion is not to lock us into no mill increase. It is simply to direct the city manager to come to our work session of what that would look like. We are not approving or locking ourselves into anything. It's just, what would that look like, Mr. Stewart? Well, and nor are we like saying we're cutting 18 positions or any of those positions. We are putting everything on the table, looking at all the options. Certainly, my vote for the motion to direct Mr. Stewart to do that is not a vote to say we are not increasing the mill levy. It is, I want to see from him and his staff what that would look like, and then we can make, a decision as a governing body on whether or not that's something we could live with and as part of our budget. So I just needed to make that clarification.
We do have a motion and a second that is before us. Any final discussion on this? Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments on this. I agree with city manager in us. It's our job to provide direction for him and staff. It's not so much our job to pick apart and line item the budget. I agree with Alderman Pittner. And just a couple thoughts, whether it's right or wrong. There were thoughts when I'm paging through this budget that came to my mind. I've been on the council for a little over a year, and I've gotten to know a lot of these department heads. I got to know a lot of the employees. And when I saw the ask for 18 new employees, just a thought came to my mind was, and I didn't see it this last year, but how bad were our services, or how bad was our customer service to where now 18 new employees are going to increase that level of customer service? Were we that bad, or are we trying to get that much better? It's just something that came into my mind. I'm all for. I was impressed with just the 2 mil, but I'm also really leaning hard towards having a level mill levy for the upcoming year. I still also think about the businesses that struggled through this pandemic and what they're having to put up with, and then we come with a request like that. I also, in my budget, I've had the aspirations, and I've been looking at the big poster picture, and it just kind of, it was one of the first discussions at our retreat. Politically acceptable versus operationally sustainable. What we want to do versus what we need or what we can do, and I think that's kind of where we're at. And I had these as I was going through the budget, or the proposed budget, and I was looking at these the whole time. And do I think we can do it? I think we can, and I think I think that would be a good headline for us. And I think it would be a good message to shoot across to whether it's the school board, the county commission, or the park district, saying, "Look, we held true. We're being the good neighbor. We know we need a high school. We do, and I think we're gonna see the benefits of that new high school. And I would hope somewhere down the line, when there's a larger project for us to be put in, that we would see some reciprocation from the county, from the park district, and from the school board being good neighbors on the other side of the fence for us. I would like to see it level. I think that's a good. I think that's a good message that to the people who put us all up here, other than city manager and the clerk. The residents put us up here, and I think that's a good message to them that we're trying and we're maybe struggling, but we're providing some sort of direction to the city manager and staff that this is what we desire. And so I look forward to seeing where it comes from. I look forward to seeing the work that staff does, and I'm proud of the staff. I mean, they gave us a budget with a 2 mil increase, a little over 2 mil. I'm just looking forward to it, and I hope we can get there. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is for the 0 mil levy increase recommendation coming forward. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Yes.
Pittner? Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes. Motion is approved. Final call for Q&A on the budget discussion under other business.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. City Manager.
I just wanted to respond to one item that Alderman Ross had a question about in there. He's right on point. I think he's understanding and applying the principles that we talked about in the retreat correctly, and I appreciate that you're incorporating that in. The question with regards to the ask of 18 staff, and does that mean that we haven't been doing a good job in providing service and those types of things? I just felt it warranted some conversation, and I think, and I hope the public understands this as well. So we have great staff that do great work all the time. And I'm especially proud of the work that the management team has done in the budget that's presented to you. My observation and my concern, though, going forward is to kind of put this in an alliteration that maybe some people can understand. When you drive your car, you have a little measurement on your dashboard called a tachometer that tells you how many rotations per minute your motor is doing, right? And hopefully most of us know that when it starts getting in the red, that's the danger zone, right? You're pushing your engine harder in its capacity than it can really afford to run. And if you continue to do that for a sustained period of time, you run risk of real mechanical damage to your vehicle and it no longer operates correctly. So my answer in response to Alderman Ross's question is simply this. Staff has been doing a great job of meeting the demands and the services and provided in a quality level that meets the expectations of the aspiration of excellence. What staff is pointing out to you now, though, is that we are running, we are running hard RPMs. We are operating beyond the capacity of what this organization has the resources to run. And that means one of two things. Either you do an upgrade and you add more horsepower, in effect more staff to do more, or you decrease the demand on the motor, which means reduction in services, and maybe there's some things that we look at that we don't do anymore as a city because we just simply can't afford to do it and we can't afford to add any more resources. And I think ultimately that's the point I want to make to the council and to the public, and it's been my observation in the months that I've been here. You have great staff that are overperforming, but they cannot continue to do that for a sustained period of time. We cannot continue to expect them to operate at that level. We can look through the budget. There's almost no fat in there to trim. That's been trimmed out over the last several years of doing this budget process. But we need to, if we're going to continue to ask more of our staff and ask them to do more, we need to give them more horsepower to be able to do that. And that's ultimately the message of the ask this year with the 18 positions. And so, we can squeeze out another year. But at the end of the day, in the long-term sustainability of this organization, and you hired me in, there's been morale issues and different things going in. Some of that is reflective of the investment we've made there and what resources we're giving them to be able to do that. And I completely agree with the commitment to the school district, and hopefully, someone's got to be the first one out of the gate, and hopefully the other organizations fall in line and show the same respect and consideration back when we need it. I totally agree with Alderman Ross on that point as well. But someone's got to be the first one out of the gate to kind of break down those walls. And I'm totally fine with the city being the leadership to do that. And I'm fine, we can make this budget work this year, and we probably won't get everything in there that we need. But again, the point was to have this conversation publicly, so when we have this conversation again next year, we've already laid a foundation on that, right? We're not presenting anything new. We're coming back to with the same concepts and the same issues time and time again and being consistent with that. And one of those consistencies is, if we expect more out of this organization and this government providing the services that this community asks for, and if we're going to meet the aspiration of professionalism and excellence, So not just meeting the needs, but actually setting the standard for how we provide those services. We have to have more investment in that. And I guess that's my main final point for the evening on that to the council and to the public.
And I will only reinforce, there's two ways of doing it. We either grow the community or we grow the mills. Final comments, Alderman Pittner, before we move on.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to thank Harold, the city manager, for being passionate about this budget and understanding that that's where staff is and that's where we are as an organization, and that we are running in the red and that we need more resources so that staff can do their job effectively and efficiently. And I think that's what we're trying to be. I mean, obviously, a lot of everyone up here did that, not last year, but 2 years ago, my first year on council, my second year on council, with double-digit increases to make this organization run more efficiently and effectively. And I think that's identifying other organizations, other taxing entities within our community. They're also running in the red. And right now we're prioritizing our needs versus their needs and citizens' needs. So again, I want to be clear that I'm not tearing this budget apart, saying none of these things are necessary or not warranted, because I believe every single one of them are. And you could add a lot more into this budget that would be completely justifiable. But again, when I'm viewing my needs as an alderman versus another organization, they're also running in the red, and they've probably been running in the red a lot longer and a lot higher than we have. So again, I just want to be appreciative of the work that's gone into this budget. It doesn't go unnoticed. And again, I'm just trying to be cognizant of what's going on in our community as a whole from the 30,000 foot and not just what's happening at this dais. So.
Number 9 on our agenda. Alderman Patagula, do you have anything further that hasn't already been talked extensively about?
Yes, I do. And I think sometimes we maybe should go a little bit beyond what we've said, given the importance of something. I wanted to thank Harold for his courage and his passion, and to assure him and his staff that I almost voted against this motion, but I voted for it because of the persuasiveness of Alderwoman Evans's argument. I think it's important we see in black and white what the consequences would be, and that's the reason I supported this. So she persuaded me, she made me change my vote, because I think we should have the facts. I also want to have the facts in terms of the other governing bodies. So we'll see what happens, but I really appreciate Harold delivering on part of what we were looking for from him, what I was looking for at least. Thank you.
Number 9, liaison reports. Alderman Patagula.
Yes. The Commission on Aging has taken a month off for the summer. There is a new parking lot, which is really, really nice and smooth and really black with nice bright yellow stripes at the Parker Center. So they've taken a month off, but the parking lot is a very visible sign of progress there. The Emergency Resource Council met. I don't know if there was anything particularly noteworthy there except for the continuing drought, which seems to be getting worse by the week. So one of the things I'll be interested in, I guess, from that forecast that we get there regularly is what implications we might see in terms of water delivery for our city and any kind of possible restrictions on things like watering lawns and stuff like that. It does not look good. And the County Planning Commission has taken a brief break from its work on revising the county planning ordinance because the consultant, broke his hand and couldn't do much of anything. So that's been put on hold for a while. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, a lot of my time has been spent with the City Hall Building Committee, but we've had that update, so I don't need to add anything further there. I did attend the Souris Basin Planning Council Executive Board meeting this last week. They are continuing to support small businesses in our region, and they will be bringing a presentation and a proposal to us sometime in September on the funding and support that we have given them to allow for business accelerator loans. So just some more details that we have an update on how our money is working.
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. Alderwoman Evans.
I have no updates. Library meets this week, but I did want to say First District Health is working diligently on figuring out the logistics of the booster vaccine for immune-compromised folks. So look for them to roll that out in the next week of what that's going to look like, how it's going to look, and who can come get that third booster shot.
They will also be at our first meeting in September for an update on a number of things. I will defer most of my activities until my mayor's report. Alderman Ross.
The ordinance steering committee met on the 28th. We made some significant improvements or significant updates to the ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and we plan on hopefully wrapping it all up in our September meeting.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Janser.
No meeting to report at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Main committee that I've met with, Visit Minot, working very hard. The federal government EPA did release a bunch of hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in possible grants. So Visit Minot as an organization is looking to be going after some of those funds aimed at tourism recovery. So yeah, just stay tuned.
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. One item I did want to very briefly touch on, and this falls somewhere within my mayor activities, is the Honorary Commander Program for Minot Air Force Base. Became aware that, and we actually approved one of these items for mitigating nuisances, became aware that there is at least one gentleman who has been TDY for most of the summer overseas. On behalf of the United States Air Force, but neighbor called concerned that there were 6-foot weeds, his yard, and he just didn't have anybody else to take care of it. So I'm going to be working with Colonel Walters and also the Chamber of Commerce and a number of other people. We're going to find a way for any of our Air Force folks who are TDY, don't have any other means of taking care of the yard, to find volunteers. I'm not volunteering staff, I'm not volunteering city services, but we're going to find a way to take care of those folks as they're deployed. As such, if anybody wants to join me Wednesday, I'll be cutting his grass at his house. No, I've got all the tools, but we're just going to make sure that we take care of that somewhere down the line. So, Alderman Pittner.
Mr. Mayor, just wanted to maybe publicly thank Brian Billingsley on the effort towards the complete count. I know we had got some rather somber news that we didn't hit 50,000 as a community, but again, all the work that went into that and the preparation, we did get close, and I'm fairly confident sometime between now and the next 9 years before our next census, we will hit 50,000 if that's still the mark to hit, hopefully. And again, just wanted to thank all the work and all the volunteers that helped with that. And all different organizations that set up. It was a challenge with COVID and all of the different setbacks. So again, just wanted to publicly thank all the effort that went into that. It was a tall order.
Appreciate that, Brian, as well. Thank you. All right, that does conclude our liaison reports. That takes us to our final item, and that is adjournment. Motion
Second.
by Alderwoman Evans, second by Alderman Pittner. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.